Shalene Drakestell, and I'm the University of Toronto Scarborough's Arts, Culture, and Media Equity and Diversity in the Arts residence. Thank you for joining us for this discussion. I'm going to start our conversation by saying Black stories matter. Our varied experiences create the narrative of what being Black in Canada is. So what does Blackness mean? What does it look like? What does it sound like? Well, if you depend on the media and their stories of Black people in our communities, you would think it's simply dysfunction, violence, hardship, struggle, and maybe some excellence sprinkled in there every now and then. But that's not everything we are. Today, Kimberly Johnson, Roxanne Tracy, and Thelson Desamore are joining me to share their experiences as Black professionals and tell their stories of Blackness. We're using the Guzozaba principle of Kujichagulia to guide our discussion. Kujichagulia means self-determination. So we are determining for ourselves who we are. We're naming ourselves and we're telling our authentic stories of Blackness. So hello, panelists. Thank you for agreeing to join me today. And let's just start it out by introducing yourselves. Kim, if you would go first.
Sure, thanks so much, Shalene, and hi, everyone. My name is Kim Johnson. I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion leader. I want to start us off in a good way. I am located in Toronto, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And it is now home to a large number of Métis Inuit peoples here in Toronto. I'm so glad to be here today. My background, I didn't start in DE&I. I have over 20 years experience total, including Canadian broadcast news media, public relations, and corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion training and development. I believe in building equitable spaces for historically marginalized persons in our workplaces.
Thanks, Kim, and thanks for that land acknowledgement. Thelson, if you would introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Thelson Desamore. I am a lawyer. I've been in practice just a little over 15 years. My practice is typically insurance-related litigation matters, and I'm resident in the GTA. I attended York for my undergrad and the University of Windsor's Faculty of Law for law school. Presently, I'm on the board of directors for the Lakeridge Health System, which is the major hospital out in Durham region, and I've been previously on the board of directors for CABLE, which is the Canadian Association of Black Lawyers, CDC in Durham region.
Thanks, Thelson. And Roxanne, last but not least.
Hello, everyone. My name is Roxanne Tracy. I am the owner of Fresh Paint Studio and Cafe in Toronto. I am a visual artist, entrepreneur, and poet. I've been practicing my poetry and art for over 15 years and have done various shows throughout Canada, the US, and also internationally as well. I opened Fresh Paint Studio 6 years ago, and since then have been inviting the community in to create both kids, adults. We also do a lot of corporate team building with the idea that creativity is something that belongs within the community. We strongly believe in community building through art and have a bunch of programs to help reflect that concept, where we definitely feel as though creativity is not something that should end, and artwork is not something that should end at childhood, and we should continue to embrace creativity throughout our lives.
Thank you so much, everyone, for introducing yourselves. So I also wanted to say that Black stories matter outside of Black History Month. And there's a reason why we're having this discussion now, because we're just coming out of Black History Month, where we've been hearing a lot about the stories of Blackness, but our stories are important 365 days of the year. So I invite you to share your story. Like, how did you get to this part in this place in your life, this point in your career or in your journey? And why do you think it's important to share your story with the broader community?
I can start us off if you'd like.
Sure, go ahead.
All right, so Shalene and I actually know each other through the media world. We had worked as journalists as part of a program in conjunction with the Toronto Star and other organizations. So that's how I started my career, went to Ryerson University and earned my Bachelor of Journalism, and started my career in broadcast news journalism, working not only here in Toronto, but moving out to Regina, Saskatchewan, then to Calgary, Alberta, came back home to Toronto, and found myself in Windsor, Ontario, working for the CBC there, and then returned home here in Toronto, as I mentioned. So it's, though Toronto is home, it's great to branch out to work and see other parts of the country. And doing so afforded me the privilege of connecting with other Black communities in Canada, and also Indigenous communities, especially Indigenous youth, through journalism programs that we had established in the newsrooms that I had worked in. So after media, I branched out into public relations in the provincial government and also finance sectors. And through that work and working, throughout with DE&I, even though people say right now it's a quote unquote hot topic or it's trendy, which it's neither of those, because justice work is year round and it's been happening for over decades, but also centuries. It's the work that we do personally, here on this panel and for Black folks across the country. We're all advocates in our own way. In some way, some of us have been the first to step in a newsroom or a boardroom or, an entrepreneurial structure. And it's in order to, how I framed my career, it all came down to what I had done in media was connecting with people and telling the stories that need to be told. And through our lived experiences, we can break the formality of DE&I work to ensure that it's personable. And ultimately, it's meeting the needs of people. It's about equity. So throughout my career, it's been a zigzag, so starting in one way and then ending another. But I've always been doing, DE&I work through lived experiences. Before we put a formal title on it, we've been doing this work. And it's, what I know and what I see, because I can identify with some of it, is I can understand the skepticism that some Black professionals have for diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially when it's championed by the majority group who previously didn't, seem to connect or seem to care about the lives of historically marginalized persons. So that's where I believe in bridge building and making those connections in order to further this work and further what I'm doing in my career. And Shalene, what you had asked about why it's important for us to share our stories, I reflected on it a bit, and I do believe it's important for young people, Black and Indigenous especially, to understand the options that are available to them when they decide to enter the workforce. So whether it be, they want to go on their own and be an entrepreneur, or if they decide to enter the corporate space, or if they decide to take up and learn a trade, which is very important for all communities across Canada. But it's important to talk about this because no career, one or two or many career paths are the same. And I truly believe that you can be what you can't see, because in the industry I started out in, I didn't know any Black news producers. I didn't know any at all, because a lot of what we see in media is what's presented, whether it be through newspapers, online, magazine, television, radio, and other mediums. So I knew going into my career that I would be sometimes the first and definitely working out lest I was, and also the only, which is not a, population wise, you understand why, but it's still not a good feeling when you're trying to champion and stand up for others and you're being shot down as a result of not having the backup or having allies in spaces where they should be. So I really like for Black and Indigenous youth, especially, in learning our stories today, is that they know that they can enter a wide variety of spaces to make their own path, to do what they'd like to do. And building our communities through entrepreneurship is very important. It's ensuring that those connections are made within community and then branching out, or as I said before, or choosing a trade, which is so important, and a lot of people should be engaged in it. It's not only a corporate path that you have to walk down, but it's also important to, you know, share our story so people can hear the truths that we have, that, you know, the roads that were paved by our parents who came to this country and who worked so hard, you know, for their families, for us, that we are continuing on this path for our own children and future generations. So I really honored to, you know, engage with and hear from the other panelists with their stories as well. But, you know, sharing a story, you know, goes back generations within across the African diaspora. So it's really important that we do so today, so that others coming behind us can learn and that they can forge their own paths.
Definitely. Thank you, Kim. Roxanne Thelson, do you have anything to share?
Yeah, I can go next. So I guess I see my story as definitely still, you know, to be continued. Starting way back, going into various careers around communications, writing, always had a love for words and being a communicator. And definitely then exploring what was always within me as a creator of art and finding artistry and beauty through poetry and then through visual art. Starting off really more as a person who wanted to share my artwork with the world. And then finding out that I was venturing into the business world and trying to do that as an entrepreneur, learning on the go, trying to learn from other artists. And at the same time, always feeling like that art world wasn't really welcoming. There's a level of pretense, there's a level of doors that you're trying to have opened, and you're constantly knocking. You're constantly knocking on doors. And at a certain point, I got tired of knocking. I wanted to have a space where I could be in control of that space, where I could make decisions, and where I could also invite others in to the space to create, but also to have a space where I felt it would be welcoming for people that looked like me, whether that was through Blackness, whether that was through my culture, whether that was through my gender. And all these things combined, I felt like I needed to start opening doors for others instead of always being on the other side of the door that was never really quite open in the way that I needed it to be open, or doors that just didn't exist, to be quite honest. I felt that I had a vision, and it wasn't one that was welcome within the art community. I was constantly being told that I had to do things in a very narrow way in order to be successful as an artist. A lot of this advice was coming, unfortunately, from many members within the community. And I feel that their voices were most likely a reflection of what they had been told over and over again. And they felt that was the only way. In my mind, I've never been that type of person. I've always felt like, why not this other way? And I've always sort of strayed to different ways of thinking and embracing different ways of being, because I can't possibly feel that there's just one way to a road of success. And so for myself, then I started art studio before Fresh Paint, which was mostly focused on trying to sell my artwork and doing some small workshops here and there. I knew the vision wasn't quite where it needed to be. And then over time, really started to think about, what does an art studio look like that really embraces community? And it's really focused on inviting the community in to create, to invite them in with the idea that art is not something to be feared. Art is not something that people cannot achieve. Art is within us as creative souls. And so Fresh Paint Studio was born as a way to bring warmth and a welcoming feeling to this idea of creating art. We have both a cafe, we have music playing. It's meant to relax people and feel like home in a way that the art world often does not. It feels very closed off. And my goal with Fresh Paint Studio was to do the complete opposite, and to really put really just focus on this vision of truly welcoming the community into space in a way that they could come in and create and feel that they were successful at something. At the time, I remember sort of putting this idea out there, and people thought I was a little crazy. Thought this sounds very strange. This idea of people coming into paint and what do you mean? Is it a school? Is it an art school? They needed a certain sort of vision that was predefined. And I, in my heart, said, you know what? I'm going to do things a little differently. Let me look at what's not there that people are currently not doing, and let me do what I feel people might have an interest in. I took the risk, I made the leap, and I felt the parachute would be there. I left my, the 9-to-5 job, and I said, this is the time. It would have been, I honestly believe, my greatest regret if I never tried. And that would have been the biggest regret in my life. It's not, quote, failure, which there's no real failure in ever trying anything. You just learn. And for me, I know that I needed to make that step in order to feel like I was fulfilling who I could be, fulfilling my potential. And I think for many, who are coming up after us, in terms of those who might be younger and looking at possible paths, the paths that they see in front of them often feel like they are just not ones that they can often see as imagining the possibilities. And I believe that, all these paths represent possibilities. And whether it's a specific sector or it's a specific area, you have to have the courage to see within those concepts and see what they could be for yourself. Because even though you're sort of slotting yourself into, whether it's being any profession, various ones, there are often different ways you can look at them that are unique to yourself. And for me, someone could say, you're going to be an artist, you're going to have a quote gallery, it's going to be like this. I didn't believe this concept of being an artist had to be one way. And there was only one path to quote success. And if I felt like that, honestly, I wouldn't be here, because I don't think I would have survived. I honestly believe part of the reason why I'm still here is my openness to being thinking in a diverse way, and being and existing in a different way that's outside of the norm, or outside of that box that has been put there for us. That box is not one that we created. It's one that we're trying to fit into because we feel that's the only route or path to success. So in all honesty, the fact that I'm here and I have an openness to the way of thinking about being an artist and running an art studio, I believe it's that principle that keeps me here. And it's one that I hope that youth and others who are thinking about the path have the courage to embrace.
It's funny how you talk about that box, because we hear about that narrow box of what success looks like, or the narrow box of what Blackness is. So, it's interesting to hear other people use the same terminology, that it feels like a box, right? Delson, how did you get to this point in your career, in your journey?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about the question, and happy to listen to my fellow panelists and just be inspired by what they're saying. For me, I think I'd have to try to address it perhaps in two parts, and perhaps it's still to be unpacked. But the first part would be, and this will probably date me and may date some of you, although I'll just speak for myself. I grew up as somebody who watched, A Different World television show, for those of you who are familiar with that, and the Cosby Show, and that example of having education be something that is sought after, something that was the norm, was something that in a certain sense inspired me and laid a platform. I was fortunate to have both my parents throughout the majority of my life together, and my mom was an integral support and part of my educational pursuits. And so I mentioned that to say, you can't become a lawyer unless you take the right courses and do well in high school. and then you have to go to university typically and get a degree, at least that's what the path was then, and then apply to law school. So early on, it's important to be in a situation where you have that opportunity. Perhaps a further part of that story, which I won't belabor, but in that particular time, and I think it's still happening there because you still hear stories of it from time to time, are students who are being put into, well, typically in this particular audience, Black students or Indigenous students, students who are being streamlined into areas that won't allow them to succeed. So I was one of those students where in that transition between grade 8 and grade 9, it was recommended by my guidance counselor that I just in those days, it was basic, general, and advanced is the only way to get to university. So it was recommended for me to take general and basic, and that one of the good career opportunities for me post that education would be, I believe it was gas bar attendant. And I mentioned that because my mom was somebody who spoke up for me and said, you know, there will be a different path for you. So in terms of my path as a professional, I've had the opportunity to be with government at one point, large insurers and small insurers. I'm with a small insurer at this point. It's at some point, perhaps I'll write a memoir, but there's a lot of ups and downs within that, having to navigate certain spaces, being one of 60, one of 80, depending on the situation. So it just presents its challenges. So, but I'd probably say the most significant part of the journey is actually getting to the point where you can start the journey, which is having the education, and actually specifically in relation to law as opposed to the specific area of practice, is something that also had a pivotal impact on me, which also date me. And there are countless names, obviously, that have been in the media lately, but the Rodney King trial was something that had a profound impact on me, and was probably the, when I was trying to decide what it is I wanted to do, that was probably the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of a direction towards law, because I wanted to understand how the trial ended up as it did in terms of the criminal trial. So even though that was something that happened in the States. So lawyers are very accused of being brief, but I will end it there in order to be brief.
It's really interesting what you said, Elson, because I was talking to a student, I think last week, and she was telling me a story that's similar to yours about when she was going into, or when she was finishing up high school, and she was talking to the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor was like, oh, well, you shouldn't aim for university. That's not where you should be. And it's like, it's the soft racism of low expectations that a lot of young Black and Indigenous people face. And unless you have that support system, that caring adult in your life to say, oh no, I expect more, then, you know, a lot of young people find themselves in situations where their opportunities are limited because, you know, someone didn't see the potential in that young person. So I appreciate that you told that story. And I'm also going to age myself because A Different World played a really big part in my life and the way I looked at education. And my parents were always very much about getting an education, but looking at a screen and seeing a bunch of African-American young people in college, you know, living life, it opened my eyes to so much more than what I saw living and growing up in Montreal. So if you're old, I'm old, it's all good. So we tend to have narrow views as a community about what Black excellence and success and what it means. So what does it mean for you? I mean, you're all successful Black professionals. What does success mean for you, and why? Why does it look like that?
I don't know who wants to jump in first.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I struggle with that question. I think I've done what is quote unquote, my path is deemed more traditional. If you're in a position where you can get into quote one of the professions, then you're deemed to be successful. So sometimes that's an end in itself. So I think it just depends. Yeah, in terms of the why, I mean, for me, I would probably just say it's the challenge of continuing to do the work that needs to be done in an environment that isn't always welcoming. So for me, that's probably where I look at the success ratio. There's a number of people who leave the practice of law for a variety of reasons. So being still in practice at this time, just a little over 15 years, that is for me a marker of success. I would say being able to, one of the things I'm passionate about, and I do fairly frequently, there's a Black Law Students Association conference that happens yearly. I typically speak at that, and that's typically in February. And so, being able to speak to the students and share some of my experiences. So for me, the success is being able to kind of open doors for others. I was part of a initial program which launched this past, well, the interviews are ongoing, but it was an undergraduate program to help undergraduate Black students in particular find internships at law firms. And that was in the wake of the George Floyd and murder, and being able to again be a part of a pathway that opens opportunities, because again, even though I had aspirations probably from the Rodney King trial to pursue a career in law, outside of two characters that I like to mention, and these are TV characters. One would be Felicia Rashad on The Cosby Show. That was a Black female lawyer that I saw. And then there was a TV show called LA Times, and Blair Underwood was a lawyer on that show. So those were the only two lawyers that I was aware of that were Black, and they were fictional characters. So it's being able to maintain and continue to move forward in areas and in spaces where you're not represented in numbers that are indicative of the population which is around you. So yeah, I'll probably leave it there.
I can, I guess, echo some of the thoughts I think that Delson put forward. I definitely believe that the idea of success is very much based on this idea of being able to open doors for people within the community who might come to you and feel like they don't have another source to access. This idea of success is about creating opportunities for others and being in a position to do so comfortably, hopefully, and really in inviting people to see you as someone who could potentially create a difference within their lives and or provide opportunities, whether that's through youth groups or other groups within the community. I think it's about finding your place within the community and being someone who really is someone who people can look up to in whatever that looks like, and people can find some level of comfort in just being able to speak with you and be within your space, and just someone who they can talk to. This idea of success, I see success as being my parents, to be honest. And they're not usually, I think, the vision that is readily put forward. It's really this idea of working hard and really believing in family and really believing in community and seeing the value in things that are not typically put on a pedestal, I think. It's the people who are understated, who often go under the radar, but the people who are really, giving their blood, sweat, and tears to build something and to build something meaningful as it pertains to family and as it pertains to community. And those are the unsung heroes, unfortunately, that, there's the spotlight, the awards and the spotlights, and they don't go to folks that are simply just trying to live an honest daily life and having a family mindset, having a positive mindset. This idea of success, it's holistic. It's, it has to look at, I think, family, mental success, mental health, mental wellness, like holistic health and wellness in terms of this idea of success. And really not really looking at just a very narrow view of what it really is, and not always equating it to monetary value of success or perceptions of success, but more so defining it on various levels. I don't always feel successful from a holistic standpoint. I'll be honest. I feel that there's more work to be done, and I feel like it's a path that I'm growing into for sure.
I like what you said about those bright spots in our communities. The everyday person who is living their lives in an excellent way instead of looking at the exemplars in our community all the time, and making Black excellence such a high feat to get to, that a lot of times people are just like, you know what, I can't do it. I can't be successful at that level because that means I have to be multimillionaire. I must be famous. I must be this. I must be that. And, some people just might be like, you know what, forget it. Then I'm just going to live my life and whatever. But we have to remember those bright everyday people who make up our communities. Those are the bright spots that, really and truly make up excellence in our communities, at least from my perspective.
Shalene, I wanted to add on to that because you're so right. And I also agree with what Belson and Roxanne have said. And Roxanne really pointed out something that stood out for me. And I was thinking the same thing, was that success from what we see within our families. And for me, my father was, my North Star, and he was my hero. And so when I saw he was working in, in corporate IT, it might have been, maybe nothing big to everyone else, but for me, it was, because he always worked, within excellence. And that's what he taught myself and my two brothers, is that, yes, you're going to go to university or college. He said if we were living under his roof, we were either one or two things. We would be working or we would be in school. Anything else, then you need to find your own place. I'm like, okay, Dad. But he really instilled in us, and our mother as well. Excellence is ensuring that you're honoring not only yourself, you're honoring your family, and sometimes there can be pressure on that, but it really was more so just to ensure that you were within community or a number of communities, and you were being honorable in that way. And Shalene, you're right. When people think of the word success and Black excellence, all the names that come to mind, LeBron James, President Obama, First Lady Michelle Obama, Beyonce and her husband, but also more recent examples like Issa Rae and the path that she's blazing when it comes to entertainment. It's not just Black entertainment, but she's creating opportunities for, Black persons who typically have been shunned by Hollywood. And it's, usually the excellence and success that is visible on a national or an international stage. And sometimes some people will not really downplay, but they might forget at times, it's unintentional, the heroes that we have in our own communities who are building. And for me personally, I would say that my definition of success has changed over the years, because with different career paths, it definitely went down a different road. I thought when I started my career in media that I was going to continue until I retired. I saw myself, getting to the top of, not so much here in Canada, which might be bad to say, but when it comes to representation, again, I would see it more so in the US. So I thought I was going to be leading CNN or NBC, and that was my path. And I said, yes, when I get to that level, I would have made it, I would have achieved, I would have helped other young journalists, bring them into the fold and give people and their start in their career path. But that has changed, not just to be, at the top, but also it's to ensure that, again, others who are coming behind us have the opportunities, have the equitable spaces that they need in order to succeed in their own way. So I know that sometimes when we talk about Black excellence and success, even though it's as a group, it can be very individualistic, but the way that a lot of us have grown up, it's very much about community, whether it be family, whether it be a religious organization, or even secular organizations. It really is about connecting as community. And Roxanne made a great point, as some folks might see it as how can you connect me to open a door? That's one way, but it's not the only way. And it's Felsen had mentioned about connecting with Black law students and ensuring that they have what they need in order to move through to get into the profession and to continue in the profession here in Canada. So it's, in some small way, we can all help each other. Again, if it's not opening door, it could be mentorship, it could be connecting someone to another person, or it could be an opportunity like this, where we connect as a group and to share our experiences for others to learn. So there are a number of ways to navigate, I would say, Black excellence and success, but for me, it really is about community.
Definitely. So we all talked about how our parents played a big role in our lives and in our education and what we wanted to do and how we decided to go along our paths. And I'm sure that you've heard this, and I know my parents had told this to me all the time. You have to work twice as hard to get half as far. So how did that make you feel? I think for me, it played on my mental health a little bit, feeling that I always had to be perfect. Like there wasn't room for there was no grace for failure. If I failed, that was the end of that. So stick with something that was less risky, because there's no room for failure like other people might have. So you have to always be on the top of your game. Have you heard that? Have your parents or anybody say that to you? And how did it make you feel as you were, navigating your career or deciding what you wanted to do, the journey and the path that you went on?
Yeah, I would say I've definitely heard that many a time for myself and even friends of mine growing up, in terms of the burden that you felt that you were always carrying. You were under this excruciating microscope for your whole life, in terms of just the constant need to feel like you could never let anything slip. Things had to be a certain way. Looking at your white counterparts, there was quite a difference in terms of what the allowances were. The same allowances were not made for ourselves, for myself. And it was one that I always and continue to live with. I don't think there's any escaping that. And definitely I'd say it does start to weigh on you. you just don't feel like you can ever just relax to some extent, in the same way that others seem to be relaxing and seem to be having a balanced life and perspective on life. For myself, it even comes down to feeling like the ancestors themselves, like I have a responsibility. I wake up every day and honestly, I feel like I have a responsibility. And I know that folks that are in the similar position as me, who might not be a Black woman, do not feel the same way. And it's one thing that definitely it guides me in my actions. I know that when I often show up, we do different events, for example, and I show up and there's an expectation that I most likely will fail. That's the expectation that I carry around with me. And right away, just I don't have to do anything, but the expectation, as soon as I walk through the door, that it's there with me. And I know that that expectation is there. I know that when folks, if they walk into the studio and they know that I'm the owner, there might be a certain perception around things that I have zero control over. And I know one thing I do have control over, or a lot of things, I know I've got control over professionalism. I've got control over a lot of things that will totally flip the script on people. But this idea of carrying these things, these burdens from, essentially from childhood, and you start to see them come out in different ways, different narratives, in family settings, then in school settings. And you just feel like there's, again, no room for error. There's no room for error. And it's a very difficult way to live. It's a very difficult way. But I think part of that, to be honest, is a driving force for me. So it's one of the things that drives me. I'm a very sort of driven, sort of focused person. And I think that's one of the things that has sort of definitely fueled me and pushed me forward as a positive, basically, as well.
I remember this phrase had come up on Scandal. Remember that show with Olivia Pope? And when Papa Pope, Olivia Pope's father, first appeared on screen, and Joe Morton's just a phenomenal actor, and he went into the soliloquy about this phrase. And he was saying to Olivia, like reminding her that she is a Black woman working in Washington and working with all white people. And when he said that phrase or similar phrase, Twitter lit up. Twitter, just Black women were saying, yes, I've heard this before, and Black men as well, and Black non-binary persons, and saying, I've heard this throughout my childhood. My parents would always repeat it to me. And so it just brought about this sense, this collective sense of all of us finally breathing a sigh of maybe relief, maybe contempt, but we all heard it. And it was because our parents wanted to warn us in a way. And it was very well intentioned, but it usually never came with the warnings about burnout, anxiety, depression, taking care of one's mental health and wellness, as Roxanne had said. And that's the downside, I would say, is that we have this scope and lens placed on us wherever we are, in whatever field, career choice or field that we go into, is that there isn't any room for error, that we must succeed. Chris Rock had a joke, if I'm this one, Black person who doesn't succeed, they're not going to hire another Black person ever again. But, even though it was a joke, there was truth in it. And it does weigh on me. And I do remember, again, working in media and being the only Black person in that newsroom, and having people ask me the most odd questions that they knew better and shouldn't have, but they did. So we now call those microaggressions. But this phrase, it's, again, very well-meaning by our parents, our other relatives and other elders. But it comes at a price. If you're working twice as hard and burning out, or you're working twice as hard and not being recognized, or you don't see the fruits of your labor. And in a way, it's being placed on us is that, in order to, do good and get where you would like to go, you have to suffer. And I definitely understand, again, where our parents are coming from and the sacrifices that they made, especially if, Canada is not their home and native land, and coming here and having to navigate racism, misogyny, and for our family, our queer family, having to be in the closet and not being able to live their own truths. It was very tough for our parents, other family members and elders. But to say this and to place it on us, again, well-intentioned, but I don't believe it's fair. So, continuing this discussion, we do have opportunities to look at what it means to have a healthy self-esteem, improving our mental health through therapy and other avenues, and to ensure that we're not leading on the path to burnout because of the expectation placed on us.
Yes, so it is a familiar phrase. It is, I kind of thought about it in relation to a goldfish. It's being born in water, and that's all you know, right? You don't know not having this weight on you or that expectation on you. So I don't know what it's like to not have that weight or that phrase attached to me. So I definitely echo the sentiments of my fellow panelists. I think in terms of a livelihood, where another phrase that I think for me in any event is synonymous with that is the last hired, first fired. So because you've got to be twice as excellent to be average, you're not extended the grace that your colleagues have extended to them. And there's that anxiety around performance. And if you're one of 60 or one of 100 or whatever the situation is, you've got that scrutiny. You're subject to the odd questions, microaggressions, having to be the representative for all. And just put it in context, when somebody who's a member of the majority, if they don't succeed, it's reflective on them, and he or she just continues to move forward. But for some reason, when you're that 1 in 60, it's reflective somehow of the community, and there's little way or leeway to make your way back. So I've heard that the last hired, first fired in that context, and in relation to the to that statement. So for me, in terms of being able to deal with it, again, I'd have to assess whether or not I've dealt with it appropriately. The only thing I can say is that sometimes, that you can only be yourself. So if it is going to be, if I obsess about the weight of that on me on a daily basis, then maybe I wouldn't get out of bed. But I can only do so much, and I think it's Atlas, Greek mythology, who has the weight of the world on their shoulders. There's only so much weight that I'm going to, in a certain sense, put on myself. I do strive to be as excellent as I can be in all, if not most situations, but I need to have enough energy to live and fight the next day. So I would try to put it into a certain measure of context.
Thank you all for sharing. So before I let you all go, I have one last question. Who are you? If you had to describe yourself in one sentence, how would you describe yourself? Who are you?
TBD. Your turn. So somebody who is still continuing to answer that question. I mean, I guess chapter 1 is I am a son, I am a husband, I'm a friend, I'm a cousin, I'm a brother. Those are the things, I guess, who I am. Somebody who, I leave it to other people to identify whether or not I treat them fairly or treat them well, but that's something I strive to do. And law is fortunately the profession that I'm privileged to be in, but it is what I do. It's not necessarily who I am. So, and we'll see what the what the future holds in terms of who I end up being when I get time to sit down and write my memoir. But for now, that's where I would say who I am.
I guess I can go next. I would echo the, I guess, work in progress piece for myself. A work in progress who definitely believes in my own strength and believes in the strength of others, and believes that collectively we can all hold each other up. Just really believing that the story has not fully been written. The vision is still ongoing, and I'm just excited to see what the future will hold.
Very similar to my other esteemed panelists, is someone who is always evolving and hoping to help others to evolve on their own path and their own journey. It's this stories that we have in our own personal stories are always being written. Felsen, looking forward to your memoirs one day. But for us individually, it's something that we're always writing and rewriting, and there are always new chapters. So, evolution is a constant, and I just hope that I can help others who are looking to evolve and to progress as well.
I am a child of God. I am the daughter of immigrants. I am a mother. I am a wife. I am many things. And my goal is to help others amplify their stories and tell their stories and share our stories so that everyone knows that we, as we hear all the time, are not a monolith, but we have varied lived experiences, and all of them are valuable. So thank you, everybody, for joining me, I should say, this afternoon, and joining those who will be listening in. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your stories and to, have this conversation. And thank you, those who are listening, for listening in.